pretty much just an introduction to what is the school. It's a school in Uganda that we work with. And I think maybe the best thing to do would be to play about a 2-minute clip. Maybe it's marked SANYU. SANYU Project.
As long as something so different from the way we live in the US. And my heart really went out to people in circumstances, the poverty, the lack. So the first time I came here was no agenda race. The purpose for the trip is to see another part of the world, learn from women. At that point, didn't have in my mind this huge sponsorship program, but I was like, okay, well, one child, we can manage that. And it just kind of grown from there.
I'm scary. I don't know what to say, but what I can say, all I really thank her and I wish God can bless her.
I started using this to meet more needs than when I saw the existence of our identity. And really the whole reason behind it is because someone gave me seeing purpose for my life. I wanted other children to know that they do have a purpose in life.
Thanks. That was a quick intro to Vision of Destiny School and the founder, Carrie Nash. I am president of Wholesome Distributing, and that's what I do for my living. In my free time, I have for decades been involved in projects that address poverty, and my wife and I lived for many years in Ferguson, Missouri, which has made the news a little bit lately. On a more regional basis, maybe 7 years ago, we began working with a homeless shelter in Springfield, Illinois, and I was just stunned by what a good job they do. Because I've worked with many of these places over time, and there's a place called Inner City Mission in Springfield, Illinois, that has just a tremendous track record, and we would go spend weekends there and watch how they would take people from drug addiction, homelessness, into, over the course of a few years, a place where they could be clean and free of drugs, where they could enter into society again, where I could bring a few of them to this meeting and you wouldn't recognize that they were anybody else but a regular person in the community, not somebody who'd literally been sleeping in the gutter and brushing up against the law enforcement. So maybe I've jotted a few notes. 6-7 years ago, I wrote a note on my Facebook and said, wow, I'm so impressed with what is done in this homeless shelter. I wish a much larger group of us, a supersized group, would address the same issues in a broken community. And I just jotted down a bunch of notes about what I thought that might look like. And within a day, I was introduced to Carrie Nash, who started Vision of Destiny in Uganda. One of the reasons they introduced me to her was because Ugandans pretty much speak English. And one of the needs to bring a lot of American people to help and to bear on a broken community is to get through the language thing. And in Uganda, English is one of the national languages, so that introduction was made. And I found out that Carrie had taken a trip when she was in her 20s, early 2000s, and just gone to Uganda, seen the poverty of the slums for the first time, and was just set back by it. she eventually, within a couple of years, came back and rented an apartment. And to give you a feel of what the slums are like, I'll show two 30-second clips in a little bit. It's so broken that almost anything goes. And education is not available in the country through the normal channels like we would think of a public education system. They allow anybody to set up shop and do school in any manner you want to. There may be some restrictions, but in practice, there's not very many. It's a very impoverished area. So in the slums, you've got no access to school whatsoever. And Carrie had had a past where someone had really picked her up and helped her out in major ways. And she started to see that she could turn that around and maybe do that for a drop in the bucket of the kids in the slums. So she took 6 of them into her apartment during the day and just began to teach them. And then she gave them meals and found out that, you know, the slum kids are not getting meals. They're not getting meals on any regular basis. Then she found out that they're sick and they don't have medical care. So she just kind of did that for a half a dozen of them. And in the course of a few years, she went back to the States, talked with some of her friends, very, very informally, not an organizational effort as much as a grassroots relational effort. And they kind of put together a fund, and she went back and grew that 6 to a larger bunch. And eventually some churches and individuals and private groups got together and cobbled together a program where she could sponsor and teach kids in the slums. Well, cobbling together doesn't always last, and some of the funding fell through. And then a group that I have worked with for many years met Carrie and took her under their wing as a person they send out. I'm a father of 7 and run a business, and I'm really busy. And in the course of time, I've just gotten to where I can only give my time to things that are really credible and legitimate. And I don't make any money off of any not-for-profit, and nor have I ever in my life. I give to them. I give real diligently to them. But I need to know that I'm working with something where the money is done right, where the mission is right, and there's thousands of those around, but I don't know all of those. So I like to know from start to finish. And one of the things that I've encountered over time, when they're not-for-profits, sometimes there can be poor accountability for funding, or worse, poor use of the funds, where too much of the money is kept back in the United States, for instance, on an international project. Or sometimes there are these things where goods are given and cash is given, and the goods are valued really high, and the paperwork looks good, like a high percentage goes to the end place. But sometimes the figures have been tapped a little, and I just don't have any time for that. So I went to Uganda, I visited with Carrie, I worked through their whole system and met everyone in it, and was really satisfied that there is a network in the United States that volunteers all of the administration for Vision of Destiny. So every buck that goes into Vision of Destiny actually makes it to the slums in Uganda. And it is a sponsorship program. So the school takes $35 a month and sponsors a kid. And all 35 makes it there. That sponsorship pays for school fees, pays for a couple meals a day during the day at school, but nothing on the weekends, nothing in the evenings, except that every child who goes through the sponsorship program is checked out medically and given medical care. AIDS is enormous in Uganda. It has wiped out a generation. So I'm 49 and I go there and I am an old gentleman. It's a very strange thing to be the oldest guy in a humongous teeming crowd of people, because they've just lost a whole generation of people. So this program kind of hits on another level. I do not like unending support of need. that has an entry point but doesn't have an exit. And, you know, there are a lot of those that perpetuate the problem on accident. And, you know, I'm not sure that we don't all do that sometimes on accident. It's really hard to control that. But this project takes a child at an early age and sponsors them through school, and then it has the end point at the end of high school. So if a kid can get through high school in Uganda and do well, they can get into trade school or higher education. So at the point that they make it through high school, the program drops off with a diploma. So there's an entry point and an exit point. Here is what is up right now. The school has purchased land. I'm sorry, I'm forward the microphone. The school has purchased land, and land is crazy in Uganda. It's a gorgeous country. Land for real estate, you realtors would love Uganda. People have to put painted signs on their property to say, this property is not for sale, just to get buyers to leave them alone. So it's a real hot commodity. There's been war in the past, but it's been peaceable for a long time. It's a gorgeous country that you'd want to go to a safari on, like a neat vacation. And it's just getting to where some of that is happening. So land is a hot commodity and people want it, and I think they foresee a good future for the country. But right now in this generation, you've got tons of impoverishment, and the slums are tens of thousands of people, which maybe we can just show the clips. There's two 30-second clips and about 4 pictures just to take a quick look at, and that will make some sense of what I'm saying. Clip 3 and 5. This is just entering a slum dwelling. There's Grandma. Okay, we can stop for a second. That grandmother and all of the children that you saw in that room, all of them are under her care, and there are some who are under her care who couldn't make it for the visit. So you've got a lady who maybe had 6 children, and I'm going by memory because I've met so many of these that I don't have them all memorized. All of the children are gone. All the children have passed away. Almost always it's AIDS related. So now you've got Grandma trying to care for 22 kids. And the space that you saw is actually the space that all of those people live in. And they kind of demonstrated how they sleep. So you've got no running water, and you've got sewer running through the area. You've got a trash heap that is, we'll see that in that next 30-second clip. It's a horrible place to stay healthy. And then it rains. And all of these places flood. The cheap land that nobody wants is the low land. And when it rains, all that sewer just runs into the place like I just filmed, and they will literally be like this high in water for an hour or so until it goes down. If it's in the middle of the night, the older ones stand while the other ones sleep on a shelf or a table, and then when it kind of goes down, then they find a place to sleep. So I left out the real horrible video clips, but you get the idea. It's slum poverty, and then as you walk through the slum, I walked with a government official who was kind enough to give us a tour because she knew we were bringing things that were part of sponsorship, and another guy who was part of the school. Men kept coming and going, and finally I turned to one of them and said, is this what I think it is? Is sex for sale in the slum, and that's what's going on? Because I don't see any other businesses. And they pulled me aside and said, yes, $2 protected, $4 unprotected. And I went, tell me about that. Well, that is, mom has 3 kids that need $5 this week, and she's able to work at a snack shop or something and do a little bit of laundry and come up with 4. But she needs 5. And so she does what she needs to do to not starve her children. So that's a level of poverty going on in the slums. They are not voluntary prostitutes. They are faced with the choice of, should I take $2 or $4 to feed my children, or should I watch them starve to death? And they take the money. So they all have AIDS. They just do. And that's the environment. Now you've got a grandmother who has 20 kids to watch out for. She can't do it. So the school, as it exists now, has, I think, 150 some odd kids who are sponsored. They look good and they look happy in the first video. They do look good. They're a lot better off than they were. But they come during the day, get a couple meals, have medical care, get a good education. They've got a shot, but then you send them home to the slum at night, and you send them home in the weekend. On Monday morning, there will always be a couple kids who kind of stagger in because they haven't had anything to eat since midday meal at school on Friday. It's just part of it. So here's phase 2. There's land that has been purchased. It's already paid for. It's about an hour north of Kampala, 10 acres, good acres. It's in a community that would welcome a school. There's the beginnings of a pavilion and a few restrooms built, some athletic fields built by hand. Man, these guys took axes and cut out giant tree stumps and cleared a field by hand to have a soccer field, because that's a big deal to have. And soccer is cheap, easily playable by a lot of people. So that is in place. Architectural work is in place. Sponsorship of the 150 kids is in place. And we're working on, it'll take about $150,000 to build out buildings that would be a boarding school. A boarding school is not always a great idea in every culture in every country, but in Uganda right now, it's a great idea, because you're not going to take any kids away from their families, so the decision of whether that's a good thing to do or not really isn't a decision. You're taking kids away from an unprotected environment in the slums at night and on the weekends, and giving them a protected environment to do boarding school where you don't have to send them back at night and on the weekends to a place that's really dangerous and crawling with predators. So that project is what's underway. The hope is to build out the school. There are groups from Ameren, Illinois, who I think are going to put a project together to power up the school once it's up and running, and that would be a generator project. There are 1 or 2 groups that bring fresh water to places like this, and they won't do it until the school is up and running. But in terms of laying out all of the things to open the school, Vision of Destiny runs the school, has the students, has the administration set up for free, has the architecture done, and has a line on powering it up, which isn't necessary to start it, by the way, and bringing in fresh water, which also isn't necessary to start it. But those things are in line. What needs to happen is to build up the fund to put in the first building big enough to open up and start teaching the younger ages in a boarding school. So that's the project in a nutshell. There's one more little clip. This is the edge of the slum that Vision of Destiny works in. This is the garbage service. I think it's just replaying now. All
What part of Africa is it?
This is the country of Uganda. Some of us think of Idi Amin, you know, in the
Is it on the east,
It's
west or east?
sub-Saharan, southeast. It is next to, it's close to Rwanda and Tanzania. It's next to the Congo. Uganda had war in the north for a long time, and did anybody see a project that went on to get rid of Kony, the guy with the child soldiers? Okay, Kony operated in northern Uganda for a long time. He was finally pushed out. There are British oil interests in Uganda, and they're pumping oil as of about a year or a year and a half ago. With those oil interests came a lot of British help to secure the borders so that they don't have people like Kony coming in and blowing up their oil fields. The benefit to regular people is that they've got a time of peace and they've kept that border secure. And there's horrible things to the north in the Congo where, you know, a lot of Western people are not willing to even go right now. But Uganda has stayed pretty secure for, especially compared to the rest of the region. So it's a good place to be working. I mean, it's horrible to think that you can't work in the Congo. There are people who do, but a lot of their work is then destroyed shortly thereafter, and they have to start all over again. So I'll open it up. Sometimes I think, well, I'm so used to this and I forget parts, and if there's something that I've said that isn't that clear, please